Under the golden sunlight of the countryside, where the red dirt roads meandered between the vast fields of ripe rice, Nam, Vuong and Bin grew up together, like three sprouts growing up on the poor land. Back then, the whole village was still lit by oil lamps every night. The echoing sound from the old radio of the richest family in the neighborhood also became the spiritual treasure of all the children. Motorbikes were a luxury dream, and bare feet were the faithful companions taking them to school, crossing the path fragrant with the scent of young grass and moist soil after the night rains. Nam, the boy of the days when the scent of bran and pig manure was strong, never complained about dirt, never complained. His clothes were dirty, his hands were rough, but Nam's eyes always lit up with joy. After each school day, he worked hard to help his parents take care of the pigs behind the house, so that together with his family, he could endure the difficult harvest seasons. As for Vuong, a small and thin man, every afternoon he leisurely drove the herd of cows to the alluvial plain, resting his head on the wild grass, looking up at the blue sky, dreaming of distant dreams. His studies were limited because of farm work, but Vuong was always the gentlest and most hard-working friend of the three. Bin was different. His family was a bit better off. He didn't have to worry about herding cows or raising pigs, and had more free time to play around. However, between the three of them, there was never a boundary between rich and poor. Their friendship was simple but strong, like the land of their homeland, like the paper kite that they had whittled from bamboo and pasted with rice flour, fluttering under the deep blue sky every summer afternoon. Thinking back to those games, I still feel excited in my heart. At noon, when the sun was blazing, the three of them invited each other to go to the field to fly kites, sweating profusely, their shirts stuck to their backs, but their mouths laughed loudly. One day, out of inspiration, they skipped school and rushed to the cool riverbank. The water was crystal clear, the gentle current embraced the floating duckweed. They jumped from the protruding rocks, splashed, played, and laughed loudly along the river. But the joy was cut short when the homeroom teacher happened to pass by, her stern eyes scanning each of them. Shivering from being caught, the three of them stood in line on the bank, their faces pale, then bowed their heads to receive the 2-page-long self-criticism. As the afternoon fell, the sunset poured gold across the fields, the shadows of the three children stretched along the path leading back to the village. The smell of newly dried straw, the smell of ripe rice, the pungent smell of the countryside mixed in the air, deeply penetrating their young memories like an eternal ancient fragrance. After school, instead of obediently going home, they hung around the village, mischievous like young birds. Sometimes we climbed to the top of the highest mound in the village and screamed, sometimes we waded through the fields to catch crabs and fish, our hands and feet covered in mud but our mouths still laughed happily. Once, we were so engrossed in playing that it was dark, the whole neighborhood rushed to find us. Parents held flashlights in their hands, calling and scolding, the lights swaying back and forth in the quiet countryside night, and then when we found each other, the scolding mixed with laughter, filled with a love as strong as the scent of rice from our hometown. Time passed by, that childhood was like a rustic song, peaceful and simple, but its echoes could never fade in the hearts of the children who grew up in the fields of their hometown. Under the clear sky of a peaceful countryside morning, the sound of the school drum resounded throughout the small neighborhood, calling the children to class. The students chatted and rushed up to the row of old tiled roof houses, the wooden chairs creaking with each step. However, under the shade of the old royal poinciana tree at the front of the schoolyard, three small heads, Nam, Vuong, and Bin, were whispering and plotting a heavenly plan. Studying all the time is so boring. Bin clicked his tongue and sighed, his eyes darting around. Or should we skip school? Vuong squinted his eyes and smiled slyly, his voice small as if afraid the old royal poinciana tree would hear. Nam hesitated, his tiny heart pounding with excitement, but the mischievous eyes of his friends made him not hesitate for long. The three of them, like little squirrels, sneaked through the path behind the school, straight to the field that was whispering in the wind. In just a moment, the school gradually faded away behind us. The teachers' voices were like distant echoes that could not hold the children back. They ran through the green fields, the scent of young rice and moist soil mixed together, making the three children's hearts filled with an indescribable joy. When they reached the lush cornfield, Bin laughed happily, his eyes shining. "Uncle Lamb's corn is so big. Pick it quickly, or we'll be caught." Without another word, the whole group rushed in, their hands quickly breaking each firm corn cob, quickly hiding it in their shirts, their hearts nervous but also strangely happy. The sound of breaking corn resounded in the vast space of the countryside, like a mischievous song reserved for children. After picking, they ran to the bamboo grove by the riverbank, where the cool wind blew across their faces and hair. The wind carried the pungent scent of new straw, the sweet taste of home permeating every breath. Under the dense shade, the three lit a small fire. Vuong worked hard to blow the fire, Bin bent over the corn cobs on the hastily erected stone tripod, and Nam ran to collect more dry branches that were as crispy as rice paper. The fire flickered, the corn turned golden, the rich aroma spread through the air, making the three hungry stomachs rumble loudly. When the corn kernels popped, the oil smoked in the afternoon wind, the children could no longer hold back, one hand holding the corn, the other hand fanning, blowing and eating greedily. "It's better than anything Mum cooked," Bin exclaimed, eyes sparkling with happiness, mouth full of burnt corn flour. "It's worth being punished tomorrow." Nam laughed heartily, patting his round belly. Full, the children rolled out on the grass, letting the wind gently blow their messy hair. They leaned against each other, their faces turned up to the purple sky that was gradually falling. In the distance, the red clouds drifted like silent flames, the river sparkled in the evening light, white storks fluttered in the vast sky. The smell of the countryside, straw, young rice, mud, clung to the children, seeping deep into their skin, into their young memories, becoming an indelible part of their flesh and blood. At that moment, childhood was like a beautiful dream, simple but brilliant, more sparkling than the kites filled with wind in the past, flying forever in the sky of memories that never went out. Under the flickering light of the oil lamps in the small village, when the school drum had long since stopped and the hoarse calls of adults echoed throughout the alleys, the three children Nam, Vuong and Bin suddenly realized that they had skipped school all afternoon. With their little hearts pounding in their chests, the three boys hurriedly ran across the rough stubble fields, trampling over the wet puddles that still smelled of mud. In the shimmering afternoon light, their shadows blurred on the water-stained fields, running and panting, their hearts filled with anxiety and fear. That night, all three of them had to pay the price for their reckless adventure. The sound of Nam's mother's whip lashing his legs, the shouts of Vuong's father as he grabbed his ear and dragged him home, and the thunderous scolding of Bin's grandmother on the grey mouldy porch, all blended together into a sweet chorus of whips that they could never forget for the rest of their lives. Their legs were scratched, tears silently fell onto the old brick floor, but deep in their hearts, Nam, Vuong and Bin still kept for themselves a very sweet memory, like the smell of roasted corn mixed in the wind of the fields that afternoon. The next morning, when the dew was still on the grass, the three of them gathered by Nam's fence, their faces bruised, their limbs roughly bandaged with old strips of cloth, but their mouths still smiled innocently. Their eyes sparkled mischievously, their laughter was like small breezes passing through the hibiscus trees along the roadside. "Today, I'll go to school properly," Nam smiled, raising his hand as if to swear. "Yeah, but in the afternoon, I'll think of something more fun." Bin smiled slyly, his sly eyes unable to hide his excitement. Vuong nodded immediately. "Let's go glean rice, it's almost time to harvest." The summer days of the three children's childhood passed by like that, filled with crisp laughter, with naughty truancy sessions, with the fragrant scent of newly cut straw wafting across the fields, and with nights of flickering oil lamps on windy walls. Despite the many beatings, the many times tears were spilled over rice, those memories always sparkled in their hearts like precious gems. One afternoon, the sun was blazing. After playing soccer with a warped soft plastic ball, the three children lied down on the green grass next to Naam's small flower garden. That flower garden, although only a few square meters in size, was the whole world to Naam. Each bright yellow marigold, each dreamy purple peony bush, each colorful cluster of 10 o'clock flowers, were all planted, watered, and cherished by his own young hands every day like treasures. In the scorching heat, the cicadas chirped loudly, Vuong fell asleep, and Bin, with his usual mischievous personality, suddenly got excited. He pulled out a branch of purple peony and threw it into the air as if it were a fun joke. The branch fell to the ground, the petals were scattered in the sun. Naam jumped up, his face as red as ripe GAC fruit, his eyes bloodshot and watery. "What are you doing, Bin?" An angry shout echoed in the yard, making the space seem frozen. "It's just a flower. Why are you so fierce?" Bin sneered, then took advantage of the victory and crushed the lovely flower beds of the 10 o'clock flower. Unable to hold back any longer, Naam rushed at Bin like a little tiger. The two of them wrestled and rolled around, the sound of thump-thump and panting echoed chaotically. Naam's shirt was torn open, Bin was also pushed down. Vuong woke up, rushed to stop him but only witnessed a scene of devastation. In a fit of rage, Bin pushed Naam away and rushed straight into the flower garden, stomping and destroying as if to vent all his childish frustration. The fragile flower petals were crushed underfoot, the ground was splashed, and dust was everywhere as if a hurricane had just swept through. Naam was stunned, his small hands clenched until they turned white. His round eyes glistened with tears, and suddenly, a burst of crying broke out, tearing apart the silent space. That sobbing, choking sound made even the afternoon sun seem to soften, and the wind also fell silent. Naam's mother rushed out of the house. She was stunned by the sight of the flower garden in ruins, her son's shirt torn, his face dirty. But when she saw Naam crying, she gently pulled him into her arms, without a word of reproach, only gentle head strokes, affectionate words of comfort. Bin stood there, his face drained of blood, his legs trembling. In that moment, he realized he had just done something that could not be undone. A small voice came out from his tightly pursed lips. I'm sorry, teacher. I'm sorry, Naam." The apology was timid like withered flower petals, but it was enough for Naam to raise his head, his eyes still filled with tears but softened. In that moment, among the clumsy children, a great lesson about respect and forgiveness was being written, with scratches, tears, and smiles that had not yet fully bloomed. Naam looked up, his eyes red, his gaze filled with tears that made anyone who saw it feel sad. He tried to press his lips tightly to stop sobbing, but his trembling little hands betrayed all the pain in his heart. Vuong stood next to him, his cheeks red, his eyes also wet, not daring to look at Naam, only knowing to stay silent. The atmosphere in Naam's yard at that moment was thick, heavy like a summer rain about to fall. That afternoon, Bin did not return home. He wandered around the village, going from the beginning of the alley to the end of the lane, knocking on each door to ask for handfuls of small flower seeds. Someone took pity on him and gave him some marigold seeds. An old man with a toothless face smiled kindly and gave him a few bunches of portulaca flowers that still smelled of fresh soil. Bin's tiny hands were covered with scratches, but his eyes sparkled with determination. When the oil lamp in Naam's house began to flicker out into the yard, creating faint streaks of light on the ground, Bin returned. In his arms he held a small package, wrapped in an old handkerchief but carefully folded in every fold. Standing in front of Naam, Bin bowed his head, his hands trembling as he held them out. "I would like to ask for some flower seeds. Tomorrow we will plant them again, Naam. I promise to make the garden more beautiful than before." Naam looked at the seed packet, looked up at Bin, his eyes still filled with tears. He didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, but that nod seemed to remove all resentment, like opening wide the door of friendship that was closing. Naam's mother stood beside him, her eyes gentle, not angry, not blaming, just gently walked over and patted the two children's heads. In that moment, sweet tolerance seemed to permeate every breath of the peaceful evening in the poor countryside. From that day on, Bin went to Naam's house every day from early morning, when the dew was still on every blade of grass. The three of them worked together to hoe the soil, sow seeds, and water the plants. Vuong refused to stand outside, smiling broadly as he carried water to water each flower bed, occasionally teasing the whole group to make them laugh out loud. Every morning, the sparkling dew drops on the leaves reflected the early morning sunlight. Those tiny seeds, under the clumsy but loving hands of the three boys, began to sprout and grow day by day. And then, after only a few months, the small flower garden in front of Naam's house was once again filled with brilliant colors. The bright yellow marigolds were like small suns, the purple dahlias sparkled in the sunlight, and the portulaca flowers bloomed into small constellations on the red soil. The scent wafted in the afternoon breeze, like a song of innocent childhood, strangely pure and innocent. The friendship of Naam, Vuong and Bin is like that flower garden, not always peaceful. Sometimes, just because of a marble or an ear of corn, the three of them would rush into each other and quarrel like chicks fighting over rice. Sometimes their heads were broken, their clothes were torn, and sometimes they even cried. But then, with just a mumbled apology, an awkward hug to make peace, all anger and resentment would disappear as quickly as summer showers. That naive friendship, through countless times of breaking up and mending, was like small flower buds. Even though they were trampled, even though they were buried by storms, they still steadfastly sprouted, still shining brightly under the golden sunlight. And forever, in the memories of Naam, Vuong and Bin, there will remain the seasons of blooming flowers, the innocent quarrels, the tears mixed with laughter, beautiful, simple and eternal as a part of the soul of childhood. Those childhood years, even though they were stuck in poverty all year round, even though their frugal meals consisted of only boiled vegetables and dried fish, still brought the most beautiful and sweetest memories in life. On hot summer nights, the three children sat on the ground in the yard, looking up at the sky, counting the twinkling stars, then giggling as they argued about which star was the brightest. On hot summer afternoons, the whole group would swing on an old hammock under the cool bamboo canopy, listening to the cicadas chirping across the fields, and letting their souls drift into unrealistic dreams about the future, dreams that seemed far away, but were as clear and bright as the early morning sunlight. Time passed quietly, silently taking away the days of childhood. The muddy three-room dirt road every rainy season, which had once left the bare feet of Naam, Vuong and Bin, was gradually replaced by smooth concrete roads, bright white in the afternoon sun. Every household has turned on the electricity. The warm yellow light illuminates the small alleys, pushing the flickering oil lamps into distant memories. The rickety bicycle that once carried the dreams of childhood has also been replaced by motorbikes rumbling throughout the changing countryside. Each person has a different path. Each person has a different choice for the future. Naam diligently studies animal husbandry at the district school, cherishing the dream of getting rich from the pigs and chickens in his hometown. Vuong, simple as his name, follows his parents' farming career, diligently cultivating each row of rice and bank of potatoes. As for Bin, with his skillful hands and hard-working personality, he opened a small repair shop at the beginning of the village, where every time he hears the sound of the engine, he recalls a whole area of childhood memories. Although each person's life is different, although busy with many worries, the bond of friendship between the three is still strong, flexible like the rattan of the forest, never broken once. On the day Naam got married, amidst the bustling sound of firecrackers, Vuong and Bin were not only guests, but also two special witnesses, signing the marriage certificate as proof of a steadfast friendship that had lasted for many years. In the strong wine, the three men, the boys of the past, clinked glasses, laughing loudly, recalling old stories. The story of bathing in the river and being scolded by the villagers, the story of being too busy playing marbles and getting their butts beaten, the story of fighting over marbles and corn until their heads were broken and then they made up as if they had never been angry. If I could choose again from the beginning, Naam chuckled and sniffed, I would still choose to be friends with you guys. Forever. Bin burst out laughing, patting his two best friends on the shoulders, his voice resounding firmly and filled with love. We are poor in material things, but we are rich in friendship. And that is the most precious thing in life. That night, the darkness fell gently, the frogs from the distant fields echoed like a lullaby to the homeland. A thin layer of mist covered the small path, the smell of straw, the smell of newly ploughed land, the smell of someone's wood stove in the distance still lingered in the night wind. Under the yellow light from the porch, three men, three children from that day, sat together, quietly watching the changes, quietly feeling the warmth seeping into every vein. Time can sweep away the old thatched roof, can turn black hair grey, can bury memories of the past, but that friendship, the simplest, most rustic, most sincere feeling, is still like a small flame burning in each person's heart silently but persistently, quietly but forever shining through the years of life. Many years later, when each of them had shouldered more family responsibilities, when their hair was dotted with silver threads, when the neighborhood kids called the three of them uncles, that friendship still did not fade. Still in the late afternoons, after work, Bin rode his old motorbike past Naam's house, calling out through the gate, "Hey, let's go to Mr. Tam's shop for a few drinks." And without an appointment, Vuong appeared, his sleeves still covered in mud, his smile still as simple as ever. Sitting around a rickety wooden table, under the shaky porch light, the three men put aside the chaos outside, to relive the old days. They recalled the childish quarrels, the mischievous pranks that destroyed the neighborhood, and the days of skipping school to catch Siamese fighting fish in the fields. There were times when, in their eyes, suddenly, an indescribable sadness flashed, because they knew that, no matter how strong this friendship was, it could not overcome time. There would come a time when one of the three would have to go further, to lands that only existed in memory. But they also knew that as long as they still remembered, as long as they still cherished the past days, that friendship would never be lost. It would turn into underground streams that silently flowed forever in each person's heart, nourishing them with warmth, with the belief that somewhere, there were always friends ready to wait for them, no matter how many storms life had. That night, when the party ended, the three of them stood silently for a long time in front of Naam's house. The moonlight shone down on the misty fields, the marigold beds that had once bloomed were now in full bloom, the gentle fragrance lingering in the wind. Bin patted Naam's shoulder, his voice laughing but his eyes red. No matter how busy each of us is in the future, we must make a meal like this every year, okay? To remember that we once had a beautiful childhood like a fairy tale. Naam did not answer, just nodded strongly, as a promise to his friend, as well as a promise to himself. Somewhere in their hearts, childhood memories still sparkled like the stars at night. The children of those years still ran and jumped around in the sunny and windy fields, in the sound of cicadas and the rustic smell of straw. Because there are things, there are feelings, no matter how many years pass, that will never fade away.